Let's make our own Game Boy game. Hello and welcome to Modern Broadcast, and in today's video we're going to be talking about GB Studio, which is a fantastic tool for all those dreamers out there who've ever wanted to create their very own Game Boy game. That's right, you heard correct. Remember those iconic handhelds from the 80s and 90s? Well, GB Studio breathes life back into that era, offering you an accessible way to build your own games in a classic retro style. So what is GB Studio? GB Studio is a visual game builder with no programming knowledge required. This makes it perfect for beginners, but also powerful enough to engage experienced game developers who want a taste of nostalgic game design. The interface is user-friendly and intuitive, allowing you to build scenes, create characters, and script events, all without writing a single line of code. And the best part? You can export your games to be playable on the actual system itself. Don't have an old Game Boy just lying around collecting dust? Well, no worries, you can also share your games online for anyone to play in a web browser or a ROM file. So this video is going to be a huge undertaking here, so whether you're an aspiring game designer or just a fan of retro gaming, GB Studio offers a world of creative possibilities, so let's just dive in and get this project started. Alright, so here we are at the gbstudio.dev website, and we have this fun little GB Studio playing a Game Boy game right there on it. That's pretty cool. So what it says up here is a quick and easy to use drag and drop retro game creator for your favorite handheld video game system. It's available on Windows, Mac, and Linux, so everyone's included in this party. Let's go ahead and click on download on itch.io, and we are taken to the GB Studio page, where it says GB Studio 3.1.0 is now available. And if you scroll down here, we get to the download section. So we have for Windows, Mac, Linux, Ubuntu, Fedora, 64 but no installer, 32-bit Windows as well. We're doing the 64-bit, and I already have this installed, but we'll just click that and go through the process of installing. So what kind of games can you make with GB Studio? Well, as you see here, there are a ton of top-notch games that were created with this program. GB Studio has the power to create mind-blowing games or experimental games. Your imagination is your limitation. With GB Studio, I've seen demakes of games such as Tunic or Doom or Five Nights at Freddy's that have been ported over to the Game Boy. I've also seen top-notch, almost AAA titles for the Nintendo Game Boy. The GB Studio community is so supportive, and everyone's pretty much willing to help one another out, and just overall an amazing experience. Alright, once we have GB Studio installed, what we have here under new is we have some sample projects which have a template. I strongly recommend, if you're just starting out, to go ahead and check those out and just kind of explore a little bit. But my goal is for us to start from fresh and make a short little game from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and click this blank project, and let's call this YouTube video. We'll hit create. Alright, and here we are with a blank project. So up here in the right hand corner, author, we're going to go ahead and make sure that says Modern Broadcast. Put your name there. Now that we have our project set up, let's get familiar with GB Studio's interface and its main components. At first glance, GB Studio might look a bit complicated, but don't worry, each part has a specific function that makes the whole game creation process easier. The interface is divided into three main areas: the Assets panel on the left, the Scene View in the center, and the Inspector panel on the right. So let's start with the Asset panel on the left. This is where you'll create and manage your game's assets. You can add and organize your scenes, actors, triggers, and variables here. Think of it as the backstage of your game. Looking at the scene view, this is the stage, where you'll build and arrange your game world. You'll place your actors, design the layout, and set up triggers and collisions here. You can navigate through your scene using the mouse and zoom in and out to get a better view. Lastly, the Inspector panel. Once you select an element in your scene, this panel will show you its properties. This is where you can customize your actors, adjust the scene settings, and write scripts for interactions. For instance, let's say we want to add an actor to the scene. So we're gonna hit add actor, and we're gonna click on the scene to add one actor. Now we see here in the inspection panel, currently we're selected on scene 1, but if we click this actor, we now have the properties for that specific actor. We can change the name, say we want to name it Arrow. We can change which direction it's facing, movement speed, animation speed if it has animated frames, collision group if we want it to collide with something, and lastly our scripting, where we can make it talk, we can change its animation speed, we can do a whole bunch of stuff down here, but more on that later. So first things first, we need our game idea. Now, I keep a reusable notebook called the Rocket Book at my desk where I jot down my ideas and kind of play with them a little bit and see if I want to build upon them. I strongly recommend you keep some sort of notebook handy so that way you could do the same, because sometimes ideas will come to you when you're out and about, and you just want to make sure to write it down somewhere. You know, for this tutorial, I thought we would do like a shoot 'em up, but I decided that might be kind of boring to kind of make, so from there I went to like a card game, but I thought it was too much like Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, so I even tried doing like the Yu-Gi-Oh PlayStation 1 game where you could fuse the cards, but I think that might be too complicated for our first project. What we need is something very simple and easy to follow, and so ultimately I decided on a RPG style game where our player works at a delivery shop and gets assigned deliveries. Kind of just pulling from that, and let's just make a small, simple slice of life game. So first things first, we have our studio set up, it's ready to go, but we don't have anything to plug into it. We don't have any pictures, we don't have any backgrounds, we don't have any characters. We have a white screen with an arrow. So how can we get our own assets into the game? Let's create our own art for the game. Now, for those of you that are not good at pixel art or don't know exactly where to start with making art, I strongly recommend that you utilize itch.io. There are a ton of assets available. For this one, we're going to go ahead and utilize this Pocket RPG. Looks like they have a sale going on right now as well. And this asset pack was made by Veriel. Strongly recommend just picking up a couple assets that you could utilize in your games. Make sure to give credit where credit is due. And this asset here, it comes with a nice tile set where we have kind of a city. We have a nice overworld here, some buildings, and some characters that we can utilize. I strongly recommend that you spend the money to get a project called Asprite, or there's another one called Tiled. This is going to really help you create your pixel art and get assets for your games, especially if you're doing it yourself or utilizing asset packs that have, you know, this kind of tile set here, where it's just all kind of jumbled together and you got to kind of put it together yourself. I personally use Asprite to make my game assets or to build my rooms, and the Game Boy does have its limitations. It's a small screen. It only has a screen the size of 160 by 144. Now your map can be bigger than that, but you have to work a multiple of 8, otherwise GB Studio will not be able to properly render your scene. And all a scene really is just a picture in GB Studio. You build a room as a picture and you save it as a .png file, and that is what players are walking on, that's what your actors will be walking on. So for this scene here, I have a screen size of 160 by 144, and I'm going to utilize this indoor. And first things first is I'm going to build my room. I want our player to start in a bedroom. So I'm going to paste this in here. Like so. So I have these squares set up as 16 by 16. That just helps me make sure that it stays a multiple of 8. And another limitation that the Game Boy has is you can only have 192 unique tiles. So the Game Boy works in an 8 by 8. So this 16 by 16 is currently 2 of those unique tiles. So that means I have 190 unique tiles left. And if we duplicate this, as we have here, I've duplicated this, as long as it's exactly the same in the 8x8 square, it only counts as one unique tile. So you'll want to really utilize your space and your unique tile set. You'll want to double down and use the same sprite multiple times because it doesn't count against you, especially when building bigger maps. Alright, and there we go. We have our little house here. So we got a bed, a dresser, trash can, some sort of shelving, and a table. And then, so I was going to make stairs kind of go Pokemon-esque, but I decided to take that out and instead just delete a part of the wall here to make the doorway. So now that we have that, or what we're going to do is we're going to want to save this. We'll want to find our game file folder. So YouTube video, assets. And so this is a background. So we want to save in here. Home. Let's name this player home.png. Go ahead and hit OK. Now, if we go to GB Studio, now that we're here in GB Studio, we hit this plus button. We'll go to scene, and it still says placeholder here. And it says blank one. So how can we change that? We'll go to our inspector, the background, click here, and look at that. It says player home. And there we have it. We've just imported our very first background. Let's go. And some of you might be asking, what is this orange little button here? So this is actually our player. This is where the player starts. And so right now, since there's a down arrow, the player, when spawns in, is facing down. We could change that to change left, up, down, or right. We'll just keep it at the down position is fine. And let's say we want to test this scene out. We want to see how the scene works. So what we're going to do in the upper right-hand corner is a play button. We're going to hit play. It's going to think about it, and then it will pop up its own little emulator window where we can actually play our game. So Z is A, X is B. You can use the arrows to walk around. So here we are. We are in our bedroom, but we'll notice we have a little problem. We can walk through the bookshelf and the border. So in order to fix that, we'll go close this. Go back to scene, and here we have this little brick wall. It's called collisions, and we'll want to paint it red. So red means a solid. The blue means collision top, so that way the player can't go through the top, but can go through the bottom, so you can jump through it. So this is great for platformers. Pink is collision left, collision right, and the ladder here is field collision ladder. So if you're building a platformer that has a ladder going up, it basically allows you to climb up that ladder. For this instance, we're just going to use our solid red. We don't want to walk on the table. There we have it. So now if we hit play, you'll see we stop, we still go out, but we can't go on the table, the dresser, the trash can, or the wall. We now have a functional bedroom. Alright, so now that we have our bedroom, we don't want to keep being this arrow walking around and whatnot. So let's go ahead, head back to Sprite. Alright, let's go ahead and create our character sprites. So using that Pocket RPG asset pack still. Got this little character here that's wearing some headphones. Pretty neat. We're going to go ahead and create some sprites. So I'm going to paste these in. And I'm going to create another layer here. I'll drag that down to the bottom. The Game Boy has a very specific palette to making sprites. So you see I have 4 colors here, but only 3 of these we can actually use, as this brightest green one is actually invisible. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that down here, so that way it's just the sprite that is colored in, and we'll just minimize this so we can't see it, and we can work on our file. Now with these remaining 3 colors, I'm going to go ahead and color in our sprite the colors that they need to be. Okay, and now that we have our sprite all made up here, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and save as. Now instead of backgrounds, we're going to go down to sprites. We're going to call this player.png. Now if we go back to GB Studio, up here in the upper left hand corner, we see it says Game World and there's a down arrow. So there is a whole drop down menu where we can do sprites, backgrounds, music, sound effects, palettes, If we do color mode, right now we haven't done so. Dialogue review, so you can read just all the dialogue in the game. Build and run, and settings. What we want is sprites, and we see here we have this blank canvas here, and our tile set that we just created down here. So it's already anticipating that this animation type is 4 directions plus movement. So what we need is we need to get this down to 16 by 16, and this is idle right. So when we are idle and right, we want the sprite to look like that. Idle up, here's us looking up, down, and if we are moving right, we do that. And then down here, frames, we want to click this add button here, create another one and another one. And we can test this out by hitting the play button. So that looks a little bit weird. Maybe if we swap those two out, maybe that look a little bit better. Yep, that looks a little bit better. Moving up and moving down. So you'll see that we don't have a moving left, but that's because it says flip right to create left facing frames. So it's automatically going to take these frames and just flip it over if we're going left. So here's what up looks like. And down. Perfect. Let's go back to the game world. And if we click our scene, we should probably name this scene. We'll name this player house. Perfect. And we got player sprite sheet. Let's click this and click on our player that we just created. Now if we hit play, we have our character. Sometimes you have to make edits after plugging it in. Let's give that a shot. Let's hit play again. That looks better. Alright, so now that we have our house and we can walk around in it, we don't want to just stay in the house. We want to be able to leave. So I went ahead and created a little neighborhood area where we can have our house, maybe a friend's house down here or something like that, and we'll just kind of play with it a little bit and make another room. So let's go ahead and save this into GB Studio. We want to go to this add button here, scene, and here we have it, the city. So I'm going to name this neighborhood. So we have our house, then we have the neighborhood, and as we see, this is significantly bigger than just our house. So our house will take place all in one screen on the Game Boy, where the neighborhood, the camera's going to actually scroll with us as we walk around. And it gives it just kind of that bigger feel, and it feels like we're actually in a city-like scape. So, but how do we get our player from this scene to this scene? That is where triggers come in handy. So if we click the add button, we click trigger, we see we have a yellow plus button here. So right here, I'm gonna click and hold and drag across to there. Now, if I click this trigger, over here in the inspector, it says on enter, and it says add event. So we can either have triggers happen when we enter the trigger, or when we leave the trigger and have something happen. Since this is a doorway, we're gonna want this to be on enter. As soon as we touch this, we want something to happen. So I'm gonna click add event, and here's where all the scripting takes place. Again, it's super simple, no actual programming language needed. What we are looking for specifically is this top one here, change scene. So I'm gonna go ahead and click that button, and we see a little dashed blue line, and it ends up here in the top left-hand corner of the city. So when we touch this, we will be teleported up to here. So this is just kind of a map showing where this teleport goes. So this teleport leads to the top corner here. The blue blob is our player, where our player will be at. So we can click and hold this, and we can drag this around the map and put it anywhere we want. So let's say this bottom house here is ours. So we want, when we touch this trigger here, that will pop up here. And we'll see here we got directions. So if we just go through it as it is right now, we'll be in the same direction that we're currently facing, which is correct, which is down, but it's always good practice to still pick the direction that you want your character. Sometimes you'll go through a teleport and you'll need to be facing up when you're just facing left. So it's always just good practice to make sure to click the direction that you want your character to be facing. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. We have our player, we're walking around our house, and it's time to leave. turn back into a arrow. Well, that's interesting. Why is that? Why did we turn back into an arrow? So to select your actual player sprite, and not just on a map, you'll want to go into the settings, and you'll want to click default player sprites. And since we're working on a top-down 2D game, it says the arrow is the default sprite. We want to change that to player. We can now go back up to game world, and now when we hit play, when we leave, we're still our character. So same as before, we're walking on buildings, we don't have any collisions set up, and we don't have a way to leave this screen. First and foremost, let's go ahead and set up our collisions. We don't want to be walking on houses. There we go. And we want to be able to go back into our house. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus button, add a trigger, and drag here. And I'll make it the whole door, just in case somehow our player gets behind there without triggering it the first time, just to really make sure that as soon as the player touches that door, we go back to our house. So we know that we want to do this on enter. I'm going to go ahead and hit add event, change scene, and we see here it automatically put it back to our city in the corner. Well, we don't want that. We want to go back to our house. So we can click scene and player house, and let's drag this down. We want to make sure we don't accidentally walk right back out, so I like to give it just a couple spaces so that way we can't accidentally touch the trigger again right away. I think there's good, and direction upwards because we just walked into the house. Let's go ahead and hit play and give it a test. In our house, outside, we can't walk on the buildings, okay, and let's go back into our house. There we have it. We effectively have in and out of the house. All right, now that we can freely leave our house as we choose, let's go ahead and create an NPC. So what is an NPC? That is a non-player character. This is where we get our quest, who we can interact with in the world. This could be a cat. This could be a person, a quest giver, a bartender. It could be anything. So let's go ahead and click add here. I already created another scene. So I got this scene here. We're going to call this the studio. And I want, let's say this one, this little house here to be our studio. Have that go here. All right. And then what we need to do is add collisions. It's just a small little tiny studio here. We'll create a trigger and we'll make sure that trigger links us right back outside of this house. Now for our actor. Let's go ahead and add an actor here. And let's go ahead and hit play. So here we have character in our house. Let's go ahead and leave. We haven't done anything with this house yet. We'll come up. We'll go into this one. So we have a little modern. There, so we can go ahead and push Z on him and he'll look at us, but nothing really else is happening. And we also need to set up collisions to not walk on the desk. But yeah, and we can leave. So that's neat. We have a breathing character in the game, but really they're not doing anything. So let's go ahead and change that. In order to do so, what we want to do, we want to click on the actor. So this is modern. We'll make him have his name, MB. And here is the script. So on interact. So if we interact with this character, let's go ahead and have him face actual, his microphone and computer. So we'll have that be the default. He's facing that way. And we can talk to him, then he'll look at us. But so on interact, we want to add an event. And we want to display dialogue. Now let's go ahead and just have him do the usual hello and welcome. And let's go ahead and hit play. All right, so now we see that he's facing the correct way. And if we talk to him, hello and welcome. Perfect. He'll just keep doing that every time we talk to him. I think we'll call this tutorial here for now. We've created our room, we've created a neighborhood, and we've created a little Easter egg of putting modern inside our little Game Boy game. This is going to be a huge undertaking and just keep adding on and adding on until we have a full-fledged game. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. I know there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of aspects. There's going to be a lot of questions. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer all of them as we go. And have a great week, everyone, and take care.